The late autumn light of Boston carried that quiet magic that only came when the air smelled of wood smoke and cinnamon. From the fifth-floor window of his Back Bay apartment, Michael Thompson watched golden leaves chase each other down the cobblestone street. He loved this time of year. The symmetry of the city, the soft hum of life outside, and the way routine steadied him when everything else felt uncertain. Inside, the oven ticked faintly. An apple cinnamon pie baked slowly on the middle rack, his mother's recipe. Saturday pies had become a small ritual, something he did ever since Ethan came into his life 2 years earlier. Michael was 35, a sharp-featured architect with a patient way of speaking and an eye for beauty in overlooked places. He built his life the way he built his buildings. Clean lines, balanced proportions, nothing wasted. But fatherhood had never been part of his blueprints. He had grown up in rural Nebraska, where silence was the family's preferred language and authenticity was treated like rebellion. When he was 16, his father caught him drawing a boy's face in the back of a math book. They never spoke of it, but the look that followed carved itself into Michael's memory, a warning more than a punishment. By the time he moved to Boston for college, he had already built invisible walls inside himself. Walls that lasted through architecture school, through his first love, and even through the heartbreak that came when his long-term relationship with David ended 3 years ago. After the breakup, Michael's apartment had felt too big, his life too quiet. He had success, awards, colleagues who admired his designs, but no one to come home to. Then one night, while cleaning his desk, he found a folded brochure that a friend had slipped him months before. Rainbow Families of Massachusetts, supporting LGBTQ+ adoption. He didn't call that night, or the next. It took him 3 weeks, but that one call changed everything. Now, at 13, Ethan was both a mystery and a miracle. His room down the hall was a riot of sketch pads, rulers, and model kits. His handwriting slanted forward like he was always in a hurry to understand the world. No one would have guessed the road he'd traveled. 4 foster homes before age 11, each one leaving marks that didn't show up on paper. Sometimes, Michael caught him studying strangers' faces in public, like he was searching for reflections of his own. At last night's Rainbow Families meeting, 2 mothers had shared how their teenage daughter had recently met her birth mother. The story had filled the room with hope and tears. On the walk home, Ethan had been quiet, his fingers tracing invisible shapes on his wrist. It was his tell. He did it whenever he felt unsettled. Now, standing in the kitchen, Michael turned off the oven light and made a decision. Maybe it was time. Tomorrow, during their usual Sunday breakfast at the cafe on Tremont Street, he would ask Ethan if he wanted to take the ancestry test that had been sitting untouched in his desk drawer for months. Because love, he thought, wasn't just about showing up. Sometimes it meant opening doors you were afraid to walk through. The next morning, Boston glowed gold under a pale sun. Ethan climbed the steps of Boston Public Middle School, his backpack hanging from one shoulder, the fabric covered in small architectural sketches he'd drawn himself. Inside, Mrs. Monroe's 7th grade class was buzzing. "Your new project," she announced, "is called Roots and Roots. You'll explore your family heritage, where you come from, and how your family's story connects to the wider world." Students immediately began talking about Irish traditions, Puerto Rican recipes, Chinese New Year dances. Ethan smiled weakly, tapping his pencil against the desk. What would he present? A family tree with just 2 names, his and Michael's? The thought made heat rise in his cheeks. When his friend Ryan asked what he'd do, Ethan shrugged. Probably something about my dad's side. Nebraska farm stuff. It was half a joke, half a lie. Michael's family hadn't spoken to him in years. Ethan had never even met them. That evening, he skipped their usual dinner routine and hid in his room. Through the thin wall, Michael heard his voice on the phone. "I don't know who I am, Ryan. Everyone else has a story. I've got nothing." The words landed like a bruise. Standing in the hallway, wooden spoon dripping tomato sauce onto the floor, Michael froze. He knew that feeling. The ache of having no story. The shame of unanswered questions. His sister's old words echoed back to him. The hardest questions are the ones worth asking. He decided. No more waiting. That night, the apartment filled with the smell of steamed clams and cornbread. Michael cooked while the city skyline glittered beyond the kitchen window. On the table sat a small paper bag. Inside it, the DNA test kit. When Ethan appeared, damp-haired from a shower and wearing the oversized MIT sweatshirt Michael had bought him on their campus tour, He smiled. Smells good. Clam night? Clam night, Michael said, forcing his voice steady. Dinner passed in their usual rhythm, passing dishes, easy conversation, quiet comfort. But when the plates were cleared, Michael reached for the bag. I got you something. Ethan frowned curiously, pulling out the small box. His breath caught. Is this an ancestry kit? Michael said gently. You mentioned wanting to know more a while back. I've been thinking about it since. Ethan's voice wavered. I didn't think you remembered. I remember everything you say, kiddo, especially the important stuff. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Ethan whispered, what if it leads to my birth parents? Then we face that together, Michael said. This isn't about replacing anyone. It's about completing the picture. Before Ethan could reply, the doorbell rang. Standing there was Thomas, Michael's uncle, 70 years old, Boston's first openly gay bookstore owner, and Michael's personal hero. Sorry I'm late, Thomas said, hanging his scarf. Traffic on Tremont's a nightmare. He spotted the kit and smiled knowingly. Ah, the big talk. He joined them at the table, pouring himself tea. You know, I did one of those tests a few years ago. Found out I'm 28% Ashkenazi Jewish. Never saw that coming. Ethan's eyes widened. Did it change anything? Thomas chuckled. Not really. Just explained why I argue with my hands and love rye bread. Mostly it made me feel connected. Like the missing pieces finally had names. The three of them talked for hours. By the end, Ethan's hesitation had softened into cautious hope. When they finally opened the kit together, it didn't feel like a test. It felt like ceremony, a quiet promise between 3 generations of chosen family. 3 weeks passed. The test kit sat unopened on Ethan's desk. At the Red Sox game one Saturday afternoon, the two of them stood in line for hot dogs. You think Martinez will hit another homer? Ethan asked, voice half lost in the crowd. Against the Yankees? Definitely, they laughed. For a while, the world was just baseball and sunshine, until an older woman behind them asked, Are you two together? You don't look related. Before Michael could reply, another man muttered, Obviously not. Kid looks nothing like him. Ethan stiffened. Michael's hand landed on his shoulder, firm, calm. He's my son, he said, voice leaving no room for debate. They moved on, but the sting lingered. These moments, subtle, intrusive, were part of their daily reality. That night, Ethan sat in silence, the DNA kit unopened beside him. He wanted to know his roots, but feared what truth might change. Summer came, hot and bright. During the city's Independence Day picnic at Boston Common, Ethan saw a woman across the crowd. She had his exact green eyes, his same widow's peak hairline. For one dizzy moment he was sure she must be related, but she just smiled politely and disappeared into the sea of people. That night, Ethan woke gasping, his first panic attack. Michael rushed to him, held him until his breathing steadied. The next day he called their neighbor, Dr. Marcus Williams, a child psychologist. Marcus referred them to Rachel Goldstein, a counselor who specialized in adoption. During their first session, Rachel told Ethan, Many adoptees feel a pull toward faces that look like theirs. It's called mirror hunger, the desire to see yourself reflected in others. Ethan nodded slowly. Sometimes I feel like I'm a book missing its first chapter. Michael's throat tightened. Through therapy, Ethan began to find language for what had always been confusion. The empty boxes on medical forms asking for family history. The awkward silence during Heritage Week at school. Michael learned, too, to listen instead of fix. To walk beside his son rather than lead him. By August, music had become Ethan's new obsession. Appalachian folk songs, the kind of haunting melodies that felt older than memory. Something about it feels familiar, he said one night. Like maybe I've heard it before I was even born. Michael smiled. Maybe that's your roots talking, and maybe it was. Maybe connection didn't always require explanation. That summer, they planned a backyard barbecue, not just any gathering, but a celebration of the people who had become their chosen family. By sunset, their small yard glowed with string lights. Marcus chatted with Thomas by the hydrangeas. Ethan's teacher, Mrs. Monroe, laughed with Michael's sister Sarah. Everyone brought a dish. Korean barbecue, Puerto Rican rice, Southern mac and cheese, a tapestry of stories. When the crowd quieted, Michael stood beside Ethan. Before we end the night, he said, Ethan and I wanted to share something. Ethan held up the sealed test kit. I've decided to send it in, he said. I don't know what I'll find, but I've realized something important. Knowing where I came from doesn't change who I am or who my family is. The group applauded. Thomas raised his glass. To roots and wings, he said. May you discover the first without losing sight of the second. The shared journey later. As guests drifted home, Michael joined Ethan on the back steps, both gazing at the stars over Boston. Dad, Ethan said softly, did you ever do a DNA test? Michael smiled. Actually, yeah. He pulled a folded sheet of paper from his pocket. The day after I got yours. Ethan blinked. Seriously? I figured if you were brave enough to explore your past, I should do the same. Turns out I'm mostly German and Scottish. Some Eastern European in there too. Ethan grinned. Guess we both have some surprises. Michael nudged him gently. The important part isn't the percentages, kid. It's that we're both still writing our stories. When the new school year began, Ethan's Roots and Roots project looked very different from what he'd first imagined. He titled it, Redefining American Families. His presentation traced how family in America had evolved from the rigid nuclear model to the diverse forms it took today. He spoke about adoption, same-sex parents, and the beauty of chosen family. Family isn't just who shares your DNA, he concluded. It's who shares your journey. Mrs. Monroe was so moved that she asked him to present again at the school's Heritage Festival. His story became a voice for kids whose families didn't fit the old templates. Weeks passed before the DNA results arrived, but by then, Ethan no longer felt desperate to open them. He did, eventually. But what mattered most wasn't what the test revealed. It was that he'd found something deeper. Belonging. That June, father and son marched together at Boston Pride, surrounded by families of every shape and size. The sun beat down, flags rippled in the breeze, and laughter echoed along Boylston Street. Ethan looked around at the thousands of people celebrating exactly who they were. For the first time, he felt no gap between who he was and where he came from. He turned to Michael and smiled. You think it's weird we match? They were both wearing shirts that read, Love Makes a Family. Michael laughed. Weird, maybe? Perfect? Absolutely. As the parade swelled around them, rainbow confetti, drums, voices chanting unity, Ethan realized that his story wasn't missing its first chapter after all. It had simply started the moment Michael opened his door 2 years ago. That evening, after the parade, they walked home through the quiet streets near the Charles River. The sunset turned the water to fire. Ethan kicked at a pebble. You know what's funny? What? I used to think I needed to find my birth parents to feel whole, but I think I just needed to understand my story. And you're part of it now. Michael's throat tightened. You've always been my story. Ethan. They walked on in silence, the air cool and bright, their shadows stretching side by side down the pavement. Somewhere far above, the first star blinked into view. Small, certain, and unafraid. Later that night, Ethan posted his school presentation online. Within days, it spread beyond Boston. Parents, teachers, and adoptees sharing it across social media. At the end of the video, his voice, steady and clear, carried the same message his father had once whispered to him.